to feel that power in our bodies. I think everyone senses or suspects that there's an untapped potential in the human body. I've been on every continent of the earth, and I've asked every audience I've ever been in, do you feel that that's there? And they say, yes, we feel there's something there, but we just can't quite get it. Why is that? So we have a feeling that there's more to us, but we rely on a written validation in a 5,000-year-old text or a scientific study to tell us that it's true. And this is, I think, the value of going into those texts, as we get to see the words that literally say, in the Gospel of Thomas, the lost Gospel of Thomas, it literally says, when these two become one, when thought and emotion become one, then you'll say to the mountain, move, and the mountain will move. And I used to think that that was a metaphor. And I now have seen enough to know that moving a cancerous tumor inside the body of a living woman, that's moving a mountain to me. And it's all done from marrying thought and emotion together. In 1998, I had my first journey into the highlands of central China and Tibet. And it was during that time we were given a personal audience with an abbot, who was an elderly leader of a particular sect in the monastery. And this abbot passed just a couple of years ago, so I'm glad that we spoke with him when we did. And it was this man, I asked the question that I asked every monk, every nun, I asked the shaman in Peru and Bolivia, but I had the clearest response from this man. And I asked him a question. I said, when we see your prayers on the outside, and we see you in the chanting hall for 12, 16, 18 hours a day, and we see the bells and the bowls and the mudras and the mantras and the gongs and the chimes and the incense, when we see your prayers on the outside, I said, what are you doing on the inside? And this was the man that looked at me. He said, you've never seen our prayers, because a prayer cannot be seen. He said, what you see are the things we do to create the feeling in our body, and the feeling is the prayer. And then he turned the question on me, and he said, how do you do this in your culture? Through a translator. And I began to think about this and realize that when we lost the words in our most cherished spiritual traditions that tell us that feeling is a language that speaks to our bodies in this world, and we lost the words that validated that, we began to think that the words themselves were the prayers, and if we say, or the affirmations, and if we say those words the right number of times, the right time of day or the right time of year, that we've said our prayer or our affirmation, and then if it doesn't work, we get frustrated and we say, well, my prayer didn't work, or my affirmation's not working for me, because we lost the link with feeling and emotion. When I was in the monasteries in Tibet, and the abbot had passed, a new abbot took his place who was already in his mid-80s. He's the new young abbot. He's already in his mid-80s. And I asked him a question, and this was in 2005, we just went back. And I asked him a question, and I said, what is the force in your tradition, in your belief system? What is the force that connects the universe? What's the force that holds everything together? And through the translator, he answered me with one word. And I thought I heard it incorrectly. And I said, would you do that again? And he came back and he answered me with one word, and he said, compassion. And I said, well, wait a minute. I said, is compassion a force that holds everything together, or is it a feeling that we experience in our bodies? And he said, yes. And that was very powerful for me to understand that, because it says that we have the ability to feel in our bodies the stuff that holds this universe together. And we're really not so different from those quantum particles in the stars beyond us, or in the tumor that's in front of us, in the suffering of our loved ones, or in the peace between the nations. It's all part of the same thing. The challenge is to make it more than an intellectual exercise. How do we know we're part of all that is? One of the ways that helped me come to that realization, there was an experiment that was done in 1997 in Geneva, Switzerland. Made world headlines. 3,500 reporters from the science journals were there. They documented this experiment, and it didn't make the cover of Time magazine or USA Today, although I think it should have. And what the experiment showed, the bottom line, was that when you take the stuff our world is made of, a particle of matter, one particle, and even if you split that particle and send each portion to different locations, which is what this experiment did, they split one particle of matter and sent one particle 7 miles this direction, the other 7 miles that direction. They were 14 miles apart, and even though they were separated physically, they were still connected energetically. So that when one particle had an experience, they would disturb one particle, the other one acted like it was having the experience. Sometimes the other one would act like it was having the experience before the scientist even disturbed the first particle. And it's mind-boggling. They said, well, how can this be? But what this tells us is that once matter is physically joined, even when it becomes separate, the energy is still there that's connecting it. And this is why it's important to me, because if we go back far enough in time, all the particles of matter of this entire universe that are expanding were all meshed together in a single particle about the size of a green pea, is what scientists tell us today. It's what the computer models suggest. That if you could go into the universe today and take all the particles of matter and take out all the space in between and bring it together and compress it into a size of a single green pea, it means that you and me and every one of our listeners, we were all once part of that same particle that creates this whole universe today. And even though those particles are now separate and expanding, and the studies show that they are, energetically we're all still linked. When we lost the information telling us we're a part of all that we see, we found ourselves in a very technological path without the wisdom of us being in the equation. So we thought that's the world out there and that we're separate from that world. Now what's happened is our technology has come so far that our very existence is threatened by the technology that we've developed, whether it's the wars or the viruses or the climate change. So I believe we've come full circle now. To survive our time in history, we've got to write ourselves back into the equation. Our prayers, our affirmations, our beliefs, our language. And when they're spoken through the language of the heart, they have a direct, powerful, and immediate impact on our bodies and the world around us. And it invites us to be very, very aware of what it is that we truly hold in our hearts as the truth of our world, because we live that in our lives, from the lightest of the light to the darkest of the dark, the greatest fears and the greatest joys. What we're beginning to understand is that human emotion and feeling and belief is literally a language. It's a non-verbal language that this field recognizes and understands. And the field works in what we call real time. It doesn't know about a few minutes from now. So if you say in your affirmation, 20 minutes from now, I'd like for my perfect mate to manifest for me now, it doesn't know about 20 minutes from now. It is a real-time application. And this is why the key, and this is what the ancients say, and this is what the monks and the nuns tell us real-time today. They say to be very specific about what it is that we're choosing to have in our lives, because what we're doing, and it helps if we understand this, what we're doing is in the world of quantum possibility, in the soup, the nebulous soup of all possibilities, what we're doing is we're isolating, we're locking one into place. And if we're not specific about what that possibility is, then how can the field be specific about what it is that it gives to us? Whatever it takes to get us to the point where we can transcend the limits, the laws of physics and biology as we've known them in the past. We have a power within us that transcends those laws, that we're more than our mistakes, that we're more than the suffering, we're more than the limits that we believed in the past. And that is where I say, wow, that really inspires me.